This is Angela Rico Smith. We're here with Leonard Speiser, and I believe his first story appeared in our magazine. We're going to verify that in just a second, but we're super excited to have him here today. And in case you don't know who Leonard Speiser is, I'm going to have him introduce himself. Welcome, Leonard, and thank you so much for coming on today. I'm very excited to have you.
Great, Angela. Thank you so much for having me. My background is mostly in the world of technology startups and technology companies. So I've worked at large tech companies like Intuit and eBay, and I sold a company to Yahoo. So I worked there for a couple of years. I also founded 6 technology companies. The one that I'm most proud about is a company called Clover. We built hardware and software replacing cash registers and card terminals in the countertops of small businesses. My co-founder and I sold the company to First Data. We grew it to 130 billion a year in processing every year, and that makes it larger than companies like Square and Shopify, and it's still growing 30%, and just really proud of what the team did.
That's amazing. And just on a side note, your reader was Melissa French, and she sent me a message and she said, "Oh my God, you have to read this story by Leonard Speiser." And I was like, okay, yeah, I have like 5 or 6 of these that I have to read. So yeah, I'll get to it. And she's like, "Yeah, we're actually using his software." And I was like, "What? Like you're borrowing his software?" She's like, "No, in the cafe, we're using Clover." And I, of course, am going, "Clover, what?" so I thought that was an interesting thing. Of course, I looked it up. I was like, "Oh, Clover. Okay, I'm more educated now." So kudos to Melissa for pointing your story out as like, I love this story. So
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Melissa, for and frankly, all the readers that helped take the time to look at new writers like myself. I mean, it means a ton, and I don't know how we would be discovered otherwise. So thank you to all of them.
Yeah, we do have a lot of good readers, and super kudos to them. And they do it for free out of love. So we're like, oh, thank you. So, but yet we have your story. I have it right here. Interference in issue 139, which we just came out with. I want to show it right here. This is your first story, correct?
Yeah, this is the first work of fiction that I published. I had a small piece that was not fiction that I put into TechCrunch, which is a tech blog in the Bay Area. But yeah, this was my first piece. So thank you again for taking a chance on me. And when I was a kid, I was all math and science, and I didn't take writing seriously at all. And that was a mistake. Later, I learned the power of storytelling, and not actually, I didn't learn it from writing fiction, but actually in entrepreneurship. Founder has to do a lot of the same things that a science fiction writer does. They have to convince people there can be this alternate reality. So I'm in my 40s, a little behind my peers on my mastery of language, but I think anyone can get better through practice. So I'll just measure my success on each new piece, hoping that it gets better from the last piece. And publishing gives me this opportunity to get feedback. And I truly believe everyone should be a lifelong learner and always be looking for self-improvement.
I agree. And then I'll do a little plug for editors. Yeah. You don't have to be excellent with the mechanics as long as you've got a good editor. It's the story that's the important part. And that was an amazing story.
Thank you.
And so one of my big questions, that was my first big question, is this really your first story? Because when it came to us, it was very professionally done already, very formatted.
Yeah.
It was better. I don't want to diss on any writers who don't format their stories properly, but everything was perfect and it looked like a professional piece when it came in. So that's why I was so confused that this cannot be your first story.
Well, I had written, I kind of made the classic error of trying to write a book first. And I've done it actually a couple of times where I go and I write a book. And writing a book is a much bigger commitment from readers and publishers, and if you haven't done anything in the past, it's a big ask for people. But in that process, like anything, like if you're starting a company, you go and you learn everything about it, you become an expert at it. And so I definitely, as I was going through the process of, I'd written this book, and then I went and researched how do I take this to the next level? And so I learned everything about how you should be formatting. And it was actually in that process as I was reading that I realized that there are editors that have a point of view and a thought about what they want for their audiences. And I almost realized I'd gone the wrong way. Just like a classic mistake we make sometimes as entrepreneurs, we want to build what we want to build and then give it to people.
Yeah.
And realize, actually, some people have a really good sense of what others are looking for. And if you listen to it, you can give them something that's interesting to them. And so, yeah, I had done a lot of research and been working on it. And again, just improving myself. But yes, this was my first published piece, and really happy that you connected with it.
Well, so are we. So are we. And so, you are now the poster child of first stories published. It should look like that when it comes in. But my the second question that has been racking my brain is, how did you find space and time to submit to us?
It's funny because my co-founder for Clover, John Beatty, he actually subscribed to Space and Time as a kid. And it was such a treat to tell him that you had selected my work. But as I mentioned, I initially hadn't even thought about writing short stories. I had been down the book path, and when I made that mistake, I said, I need to ask people to take the time to read. So I switched to short story writing, and Space and Time had exactly the kind of audience that I was looking for the type of work that I was putting together.
Awesome. Well, and we of course hope to see you back much more. I want to talk about the story, Interference. It is an amazing story. The thing that caught my eye, especially with everything that's been going on in 2020, and the reason why I fell in love with it, is because you treat some pretty hot button topics here, like race and disparity, financial disparity, and things like that, and the prejudices. And you manage to do it without pointing a finger at any single race by using light wavelength. And to me, I'd never read anything like that before. That was the most brilliant idea. And I loved it because it's a unifying story about division, where if you have a story about division, it's divisive, so thank you for that. And tell me how you even came up with that idea.
Yeah. So I'm on the board of a large nonprofit that helps kids get out of their situation. It's Think Together provides this ability to take these schools that maybe have 30% graduation rates, and they take them up to 80%. And it is all about like helping people understand the situation of a lot of the economically challenged kids in the school and figuring out how to make adjustments to get it there. And it's kind of a miracle what they're able to accomplish. One of my fellow board members had recommended that we were swapping books that we loved. And he had recommended this book called Common Ground, which was written in the 80s. It's a Pulitzer Prize winning book on the essentially desegregated busing in Boston. And it follows three families, and it puts you in the shoes of those families. And I think there's a lot of real life stories of challenge and struggle. But when we read it in the nonfiction format, it's hard for us to pull our own beliefs and ideas and backgrounds out of it and really expose ourselves completely to the lessons that we need to learn from basically walking in someone else's shoes. I think that's where science fiction is really magic, because we can strip out all the things that might put us in the wrong mindset to absorb those lessons and just focus people on picking up the lesson at a time. As to why I chose light and wavelengths, my last startup, I worked with some amazing engineers, and we created a box for cooking. And you would open this door, you put the food in, it would like camera detect, oh, these are the three types of foods. Here's the temperature I need to get each one to. Thermal camera would monitor it, and then we would steer RF waves into the food in different amounts so that we could heat different foods to different temperatures at the same time. So very Jetsons magic experience. And I guess after you spend 3 years working on RF waves, it kind of just gets stuck in your head, and you start to see connections that you might not otherwise see. So I was perusing the book, and halfway through, I was putting these connections together and thinking this would be a great way to communicate this to a broader audience.
Oh, I love that. And that's the very cool thing is your background. You could see that, because I was actually reading it going, light waves, right? You call them light waves, or are they radio waves, or are they? so,
Yeah.
so no, well done. In school, you would have scared me if we were in the same school. I would have been like, oh, that's that math guy. Of course, I was like Jane Austen, Jane Austen. So.
Well, it's funny because again, like when I was growing up in school, I was all math and science, and I didn't put enough. I tried to figure out how to get out of my English classes and my English work. Sitting two seats over to me in English class was a woman named Stephanie, and she focused on it, and then she wrote the Twilight series. So stay in school, kids, listen to your English teachers. She did it right.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. All right, well, you have an excellent story here. Where do you think you're going to take it from here? Do you want to see it go into another format, like graphic novels, video shorts?
Yeah, I would love to see the themes of these stories. It'd be great if they were entertaining enough to transfer to different media. So I'm hopeful that we can find additional media to bring these themes across in. Quite honestly, like for me as a beginning writer, I'm just focused on this self-improvement. I had an idea even as I was working on this. I need to create software that shocks me every time I use passive voice as I'm typing. I still have this very bad habit. I need to get it removed from my writing. But in the meantime, I'm just focused in on how do I improve my craft.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And the fact that you understand passive voice, just kind of poster child of, I think that's a struggle that you continue with, forever. I don't think you ever really get rid of that passive voice necessarily, not naturally.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to switch gears a little bit to the cover. This was put it up here so you can see it. The art in this brought me to tears, and it is good. It's by Arthur Haywood, who did the cover, but it was the shock of how well it connected to your story. And it is a beautiful piece, but I'm not really like drawn to tears normally when I look at art, But I had just read your piece. I think we had just accepted it. Arthur had no idea what the story lineup is. He's just creating a piece. And they sent this to me. Diane Weinstein sent this to me, and all the themes in your story are somehow wrapped up in this picture. Not all of them, but
yeah.
I was like, oh, amber, and then you've got the blue. It's a person. It's and so that was incredible. And then the backup was Anthony Rhodes did the interior illustration, and I said that's going to be a big challenge because you have to translate color to black and white, and he nailed it. He's awesome. I absolutely love Anthony. So that was the artwork. That was my little story behind, kind of getting it in my email. And Ryan thought I was crazy because I'm like, oh, there's the cover. Like, I think his reaction was, is it really bad? Is it really bad? No, it's just too good. But when you saw the cover, did you have that same kind of reaction?
Yeah. I mean, color has this amazing ability to transport us. And I love the cover. A lot of people commented on to me. Many of my friends' kids said, did you do the cover? And I'm like, no, I just wrote in there. I'm sorry. But it was clear that it had a huge impact on all ages. And Anthony did a great job on the art for the story. Wavelengths are these crazy things. Even physicists have trouble wrapping their heads around how they work. It's funny. It's like when we were working on the product, waves can change their shape. So like a wave can be like, it can fit through like the thinnest of spaces, but then also if you wrapped it into a circle, it could go through a space like this. And it's just so hard for our imaginations to be able to grok this concept. So, special thanks to the artists who can translate imagination into reality for us. It's not easy.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, especially as somebody who does not do visual art at all. As an entrepreneur, you brought this up earlier, you have that creativity to be able to do science fiction. You talked about the similarities of that. Can you go a little more into that? Because what is the difference in your mind between I have a great idea for this company or I have a great idea for this story?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, most people, including the college version of myself, when you think about starting a company, it's like, have this cool idea, build a product, they will come. And that's basically almost never the case. You start with the idea, and then the first thing you have to do is convince highly rational engineers to go work on something highly irrational. Like, quit your job and come work on something that has no revenue. And then you go to your customers, try this out and risk your work on this, and investors. You might lose a lot of money. And so we ask people to take risks on us, and the only way we really succeed on that is through this storytelling, right? And that's where I see a lot of similarities, is that great entrepreneurs are also great storytellers, and the classics are people like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. They're just amazing storytellers. Actually, one of my favorite videos on Steve Jobs isn't one where he's presenting a computer or a phone. It's when he's presenting his idea for the campus for Apple in front of the Cupertino City Council. And even in this context, he brings you into this story. He takes you in and he tells you what this future is going to be, and you're like, I want to go there with you. And it's an amazing. It's on YouTube. It's a great video to watch. And I look at, when you're writing science fiction, it's the same thing. You're trying to create, this is your superpower. You're creating a future world or an alternate reality, and you're getting people sucked into it. And it's very similar.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I will say, officially, you're a latecomer, but you're awesome. You got it. So one of the things that you had brought up in our conversations previous to this, which I had never had the concept of, but you're right, is how publishing is like investing. Mm-hmm. We're taking stories that we don't know if anybody will like them or not. It can't necessarily be what we like, because the magazine will be all horror. I can't do that. Lose everybody. Everybody will be like, why, Angela? But how you brought that up, and I really like that concept.
Yeah, there are a lot of times when we look at investors for startups, we just see this one group of investors, but there's actually very different types of investors out there. There's the ones who raise $1 billion. And if you've raised $1 billion, you can't write $50,000 checks times, it's just, there isn't enough time in the day. Mm-hmm. And so they have to pick investments that are further along, lower risk. And then you've got what we call the angel investors. And the angel investors, they'll typically start with a smaller fund of money, but what it allows them to do is take risks on the newer entrepreneurs. And they're the ones who are discovering those future mega companies. In much in the same way as I was doing my own sort of research and trying to understand, how do I match up, and how do I essentially, it's like, again, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. What is the other person that you're trying to work with trying to accomplish? What's their goal? And realize that publications like Space and Time, you've found an audience that wants to discover the new authors and the new stories. And I realized, after I kind of done some research, that a lot of my favorite authors had gotten their start writing short stories, because that's where they built their audience up. So very, very similar. Angel investors find those for startups. The larger VCs then go on to back them and give them more distribution and larger audiences. And it was really interesting. Again, a lot of parallels.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I guess even the ego is still such a part of that, because I mean, I hate to say the word rejection, but we just don't have enough paper for all the stories we would love to take. And then, my project didn't make it. I guess it's the same kind of, so, and we never think of it that way. The writers always think everybody else doesn't really have a soul, Yeah.
No, it's hard until you put yourself in someone else's shoes. And it happens everywhere. When you're not a manager of people and you're the employee, you have a feeling about managers. Then when you become a manager and you realize that there's all these challenges, then you develop context. And I'm always going back and apologizing to people for how I behaved when I was younger. Every time I learn why they may have behaved the way they did in our interactions.
Yeah, that's funny. That is really funny, because I do the same thing, because now we understand more. So you should just write stories about wavelengths. This is the managerial wavelengths, and this is I love the concept. It works. If you are now a part of the writing community, and we really want you to stay. Where do you see your place in that? What genre, or do you think you'll just kind of be a maverick, explore, just kind of going everywhere?
Yeah, I always like to teach. That's kind of one of my themes. Is I always like someone to walk away with having learned something from whatever it is I've worked on. I find that nonfiction creates this challenging battle, at least for me, between presenting facts and engaging the reader. And I always feel like the presentation of facts kind of overwhelms the entertainment value of a nonfiction book. Um, and that's one of the reasons I like science fiction, because you can change all the variables you need to. You can create a world that helps you tell that story. I'm a huge fan of. I've read a lot of military strategy and tactics books, and I'll say that to this day, the best book on strategy and tactics that I've read is still Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, because it engaged you and you learn these lessons, and they're really good strategy and tactics lessons that Orson Scott Card covers in his book, and way more entertaining and engaging to somebody to get them excited about the concepts.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's always my thing too, is science fiction, and really all fiction changes how we think about things, changes the world, so somebody has to conceive of it first. So there is a place for art. Well, as a writer, I'm addressing Leonard Speiser, the writer. What kind of rituals do you have? Like, a lot of people get very into, it's got to be this kind of music, this room, or they like the coffee shop environment. What's a writing ritual look like for you when you sit down?
Yeah. There's a movie called Finding Forrester, and that world kind of is true for me. And it's Sean Connery's character. He gives his student one of his pieces to get him started, and then the kid riffs off of it and writes something really, really great. And I kind of find that's the case for me. And whether I'm starting a company or I'm writing, is to sort of stand on the shoulders of others, to get inspired by something else, oftentimes from a different genre, a different area. I've got a book right now that I'm enjoying called How to Read Literature Like a Professor. And I basically get through maybe 3 pages of it before I start thinking about an idea, and then I have to run up and go to my computer and start writing. And then the other thing that I've started to do, which I didn't think I'd do, is I found this book, another, again, sort of self-improvement has been something that I've learned later in life, that you have to improve yourself. And I found this book called Creating Character Arcs that I knew I had interesting ideas around the science side, but I felt like my characters weren't really interesting. And Creating Character Arc gives you this framework. And so I created this, very geeky spreadsheet with, all the different elements of creating the character. And then in their book, they use Thor and some other movies. And so I put all those down as to like how that character was developed. And then I sit there and I'll put all of my details. So I'll copy the tab over with my idea. I'll first put all the bones. Then I'll actually write the book from the middle to the end, or the story from the middle to the end, and then go back and write it. And so this has become a way for me to not get lost, because I used to just start writing and then midway I'd just lose it and I couldn't get through to the end. So I didn't think I would do it that way, because it felt a little bit too analytical, but it's really helped me increment and build over time. And so I can, I'll write a short story now in 4 to 8 hours once I've got, the inspiration for it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, once again, poster child of first story. And that's actually something that I talk about all the time, is authenticity. You've used how you think instead of trying to be Stephen King, and I don't know what Stephen King's process is. Instead of trying to adopt that, you found your process and your voice, and including the things that, like, I would have never included so much science into my story because, I don't think that way. Right. So that's awesome, because it works. So this is my thing. Authenticity works. Write in your own voice, write in your own style, create your own rituals. Don't try to adopt everybody else's. Yeah. So that's awesome. you talk about books that you want to read or books that you have read that influence you. Do you have any that you can think of as like life-changing? And I'm going to actually put the links in the below whenever we post this so people can go find these books.
Yeah, so I always keep a fiction and a nonfiction book next to me, and I always have an audio fiction and nonfiction, queued up on my phone. Mostly I read science fiction. One thing I've noticed though is a lot of times it's not just the book and the story, but it's when in your life you read it. So an example of a book that meant a lot for me was actually The Good Earth by Pearl Buck. Not a science fiction book, but when I was struggling as an entrepreneur and I was a first-time father, that was the perfect book to read then. I don't know if I would have appreciated it in high school, but I definitely appreciated it at that moment in my life. As a kid, the books that inspired me, or the authors that inspired me, Asimov and Orson Scott Card both just transported me into their world and got me excited about technology in many ways. Pushed me to want to go to, where I went to MIT and continued on with technology. And so it's some of those classics like Foundation and Ender's Game and the Worthing Saga and those types of stories just still to this day are exciting. I have so many books that I have not been able to. I mean, there's so many great authors, and I'm constantly discovering new ones. I have one here that I've been going through. This is hard-boiled Wonderland. Very different style of writing, and it's just fantastic. And then I'll also go back, and so I'm also reading through Arthur C. Clarke's old, like this is from the 50s, a bunch of his short stories, just inspired by each author's approach. It's so different, and it just gets me excited. Like I'll read it, and like I said, I'll put it down after. I can only get through so many pages before I get excited and I want to go write.
That's awesome. Yeah. That is so good. And I would say you are authentically living this life, so you can't go anywhere. We've got you now. You are one of us. How about creative endeavors in the future? Like where are you going? You've got Interference. I'm assuming you've got more stuff out there floating around. So everybody watch for your TOCs. He's out there. Where are you going from here? I mean, businesses, you don't have to give us any spoilers or anything like that, but
yeah, no, I always tell people that entrepreneurship is a career. A lot of times when people go to start a company, they think it's going to be one and done. And after having done a number of startups and many failed and some succeeded, I think that's true with any creative endeavor, which is you can't look at it as a one and done. And so for me, I'm going to just continue to write. I'm going to continue to try to expand and grow an audience that wants to read what I have to write, but also continue to give me the feedback to become a better writer. And so I'm excited. I'm going to look at it as something that I can do for a long time. And now that my kids are finally of an age that, my youngest is now 10, I've got my Saturdays and Sundays back, so I can do that.
That's funny. Yeah, it does. I think many careers start after the kids are a little bit out of that super needy stage. So you're not starting late. You're really right there with everybody.
I think that people can start at any age as long as they have the desire. And frankly, in any area, if they want to change their job, if they want to change their career, I've seen it usually comes down to motivation. That's usually what causes someone to succeed or fail in something is how motivated they are at it. And so you just have to want it. Yeah,
exactly. And I like, I had Linda D. Addison, actually our poetry editor, brought up to me one time because I had just switched over to being a full-time writer. And I was in that stress of, but I haven't actually written anything. And she pointed out, when we're thinking, we're still working, you're processing things. And so, that's, I like that you bring that up. The whole time that the kids are little, we're just processing, and then we come out with things. So that's really good. I really want to know everything about you. If somebody's going to read Interference, I found your Twitter. Where else can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Leonard Speiser on Twitter. Although you'll probably get more startup things from me than writing pieces there. But thanks to you, I also now have my first Amazon author page. So that's great. And those are really the two best places for finding out more about what I'm doing.
Awesome. And then super simple because usually it's like, oh, I'm on Instagram at this and I'm da 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 da. And there's like a book of links. So yeah, that's it. Twitter and Amazon.
That's right.
So, um, anything else you want to share? Like, secrets, like I'm going to come out with this great book tomorrow. We have the scoop.
No, I think that first of all, again, thank you so much for your work that you're doing to create an audience and an opportunity for new writers like myself and others to be discovered and also love getting feedback. Never mind anything critical about my work because I look at it as an opportunity to improve and so hope that we can continue to work on future endeavors and if you ever have an idea for a category that isn't being covered, it's funny. I have a designer that I work with who does our exterior design on hardware products I've worked on in the past. And he told me, he said, you think that as a creative, we want a blank slate, but we don't. We need some constraints. You have to kind of give us a box work. And then from within that box, we can do great things. And I've learned that that's the case also with writing and other forms of art, which is you can have almost too much creativity and you can lose yourself in it. And so it helps authors to know these are the categories, these are the areas, this is where you're seeing the most reaction to themes and areas that are interesting. And then let's figure out how we take our unique take to that subject.
That's awesome. Well, I thank you for being here. You've had so many good things that you've talked about. The poster child of first stories, formatting is important. I like that you brought up you've had companies that didn't make it. We've all had stories that have been rejected. As long as we keep going,
that's right. Eventually
you'll break through, and editors are important. Is there anything else that you want to tell anybody, like another first writer? You're sitting down with this teenager and he's wanting to submit to Space and Time or Asimov or whatever. What would you tell him?
Yeah, again, kind of thinking about that movie Finding Forrester where Sean Connery yells at the kid to punch the keys. A lot of the times you sit in front of that computer and you just don't know what to type, and sometimes you just need to start typing something, and it's like exercise. You need to every day you need to get in there, and it doesn't really matter what you're writing. It's the act of writing that gets you to start developing your story. So I would say that was something that took me a while, like to sit down and just type something, even if you know you're never going to share it with anyone. I'd encourage people to do that. And the other piece is, again, put yourself in someone else's shoes. Think about what are the editors and the publishers going through? What do they need to accomplish for their goals? And then think about, we talked about things like that, formatting, right? All those things are important because it saves you time. And it helps you also determine, is this person serious or not? And these are sometimes the only ways you can very quickly do that when you have hundreds of pieces coming in. So just always put yourself in someone else's shoes and figure out what their motivations are.
Well, awesome. I would say you have great advice. I appreciate you being here and letting us pick your brain about all this stuff. Appreciate you trying out Space and Time for your first story, because appreciate Melissa French thank you for pointing that out. That's why I keep my email. It is overloaded, I admit, but feel free to keep those emails coming because I do see them, even if I don't always answer. But thank you for being here. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom, and we really look forward to seeing more of you.
Thank you for having me.